Greetings again, friends. Well, today we are going to be dealing with the sixth commandment. Now, I just want to welcome everyone to the channel, and it's good to see that we now have 145 subscribers. Now, I'd like to still get this up to 150 by the end of this series. So if you could help me out there, if you're not yet subscribed, please take just a moment to go and click the subscribe button and be sure to hit the notification bell when you do, so you'll be ready for the next video when it's released. Now, in this study of the 10 Commandments, we're looking for what God wrote with his finger. Now, they had special emphasis because of what God did in doing this, and the 10 Commandments were directly by him, so we should pay special attention. Now, we see this in Exodus 31:18, and it says, "And when he had made an end of speaking with him on Mount Sinai," that is Moses, "he gave Moses 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God." So refer to the 10 Commandments playlist as I go through these different videos if you want to go back to this. Now, remember, these tablets were divided into either 5 on one tablet and 5 on the other, or 4 and 6, like the division of loving God and loving others that we've talked about before. We started on the loving others commandment last time and discussed honoring your father and your mother. And you should go back and look at that video. It is an often neglected one, and even characteristic of the perilous times in the last days, that people would be disobedient to parents. So make sure you see that. Now, this commandment is getting more into the loving others section when we talk about one of the important things that you're not supposed to murder. You should not murder. You shall not commit murder. You have to understand this is the part of the 10 Commandments where they start going repetitively more. Exodus 20 is where we first see them. And Exodus 20:13 simply says, "You shall not murder." Okay, so we know that God does not want us to take human life. And murder is the word used there. And we know that the 10 Commandments are going through this. They're mentioned again in Deuteronomy 5. But we know that murder is a reference here to premeditatively taking human life. And it's not talking about the accidental taking of life. You can go see other passages of scripture that deal with incidental killing, or it's not talking about animal life that you take. The word, again, just means a premeditation to take human life. So we know that the first murder did take place very early on. We know that it was jealousy that happened with Cain and Abel. Cain was jealous of God accepting Abel's sacrifice, and Cain didn't do it that way, and so we see in Genesis 4:8 what happened. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. Now we see that God did not take Cain's life at this time because of what he did in taking his brother's life, but he was cursed and he was banished from fellowship with many other people. And you can kind of see this in Genesis 4:11 and 12. And it says, "So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond you shall be on the earth." Now, Cain's line did become more and more corrupt. And it was even part of the reason why God had to send judgment on the whole earth in the days of Noah, because of how bad things got as time went on. But when we come back to the Ten Commandments, we see that they are given to Israel. The children of Israel were God's chosen people to continue his word with people, and the punishment for this was death. Now, Israel did have laws to govern that accidental killing that could take place, and people could flee to a city of refuge if they accidentally took a life. You can see a lot more about this from Numbers 35. And you see many examples of the cities of refuge. There were 6 of them, and they were in strategic places close to where the different tribes lived and where people could flee. Numbers 35:11 says, "Then you shall appoint cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills any person accidentally may flee there." So we know that manslaughter was killing, but it wasn't considered the same as murder. Now, you see this even in courts and stuff with the distinction of manslaughter and murder. But murder was that premeditated taking of life, and the penalty was death. And we see Numbers 35:16 saying, "But if he strikes him with an iron implement so that he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death." And there's all kinds of other examples of how someone's killed, but if they're murdering, they're put to death. So you can go look at Numbers 35 to see more about the cities of refuge and these distinctions with murder and manslaughter. Now, for the remainder of the discussion of this video and this important of the 6th of the 10 Commandments, I'm going to see how it relates to others and address the cause or origin of murder. Now, Jesus said that murder begins with the heart, with hatred in your heart. In Matthew 5:21, he says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment." So Jesus acknowledges this 6th commandment, and he goes on and says about it, referencing a deeper meaning in verse 22. He says, "But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, 'Raka,' shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, 'You fool,' shall be in danger of hellfire." Now, we won't get into the distinction of those things that people say, but Jesus was talking about something that was the motivation behind breaking the commandment, and anger and hatred is that in this text. So, friends, you must not let anger take root in your heart, or else it'll turn to hate, and then that will lead to murder. Now, remember, Jesus' standard in keeping the 10 Commandments takes it to the heart, that motive, and that it says it's equivalent of breaking the commandment. So you shall not commit murder. If you hate and have anger in your heart, it's equivalent to breaking the commandment. John even talks about this in 1 John 3:15. He says, "Whoever hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him." So, friends, you better not have hatred in your heart toward other people, because that is really like murder. So, this sixth commandment does find its way into some other lists. It's actually reversed with the seventh commandment in a couple of these places in the New Testament. First, let's look at Romans 13:9. And it says, "For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet, and if there is any other commandment, are all summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Okay, so we have that passage which does mention you shall not murder. And again, you see there that he doesn't name all the commandments, just a few in mentioning them, with the idea of loving others, that second set of the commands in the division. And then we have the listing of the Ten Commandments also in the keeping of the law, when it's referenced in the book of James. And James 2:10 reminds us that, "For whoever shall keep the whole law and yet stumble in one point, he is guilty of all." So, friends, if you just break one commandment, you're guilty before God. He goes on there in James and he says in verse 11, "For he who said, 'Do not commit adultery,' also said, 'Do not murder.' Now, if you do not commit adultery, but you do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law." So again, you see that reversal of the two commandments, but you see "you shall not murder" coming into a listing of the commandments. So even if you think you're not guilty of breaking a commandment like this, "You shall not commit murder," you can be guilty of it in the eyes of God if you are just guilty of anger that turns to hate. Now, there's one other thing I want to mention before concluding here, and with the idea of murder being that premeditative taking of another human life. Now, of course, it's illegal to commit murder, but murder is often committed in a legal way when it comes to human life and this idea of abortion. Now, abortion is taking human life. So, I mean, you can try to say it's not human life, but that's crazy, because it is distinctly human, and the life even is there's just so many lies out there about that. Oh, the life, the heart begins to beat early. Just so much. Go look back and look at the top 10 lies about abortion in the video I did on that. Life is sacred, just as our Creator has intended it to be, and He doesn't want us to take another human life. You can go back and look at the video that I did, even talking about the sanctity of life. Now, it was a great blessing to know that there was no longer a United States federal law that allowed for abortion, legalizing it, even though some states still allow for it. This murder of innocent unborn, which is abortion, was finally overturned last year with the Roe versus Wade. The federal law that was in place was overturned and sent back to the states for discussion. It didn't do away with abortion completely, but it did not give the federal right for it. So I did a video talking about that, like birthday present for me, but just go back and look at the whole playlist on abortion and life issues, and you'll see all the videos tied to that. So I trust this video on the sixth commandment has been very important to encourage you and to remind you of the importance of keeping God's 10 commandments and this sixth commandment, you shall not commit murder. So like this video, share it with others, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you'll be ready for the next video as we continue in this series with the seventh commandment next time.